Hey, I'm Sanna Heimann. I'm going to show you today how to build your own cajon extreme easily and quickly with the new cajon assembly kit from Schlagwerk. The only things you guys need additionally are a screwdriver, a hammer, a pencil and a ruler. Before we begin, let me show what's inside this pretty package. When you look at the components, you will see that they have been prepared very carefully. That's what makes their assembly so hassle-free, simple and fast. First we have to assemble the resonance box, but in order to make the next step a little easier, I'm first going to lay these tension belts parallel to each other on the table with the blue tanks pointing downwards, and then put the base panel of the cajon on top of them. By the way, it doesn't really matter which panel you use here, but I take the nicer looking one for the top panel. I start by putting some glue here on this edge, or what's known as the tongue. Now we have the glue everywhere we need it, so I can simply stick the resonance box together. I can even leave one side panel standing on its own long enough for me to fetch the next one. It looks a bit squint at the moment, but that's because the top panel is missing. It's best to attach it to a side panel, on one side first, and then on the other. Here it's extremely important to make sure that all the components are flush. As long as the glue hasn't dried, you can still correct things a little. Now it's time to use the template. This ensures that your instrument has nice right angles. Position the template in the middle of the resonance box and the side panels will simply align themselves with it. Now I have to check once more that all the panels are flush. This is very important. Now it's time to use the tension belts I laid out at the start. I pull them up around the cajon, close the buckles and then pull the belts as tight as I can. At this point it's possible that something may shift again, so I have to check again that all the edges are flush. The glue should be allowed to dry for about 20 minutes. In the meantime, I can start preparing the inner working of the cajon. Now, first of all, I mark the points at which I will have to insert the screws and nails later on. This strip, the one with the beveled edge, is the one the snare unit will be attached to later. If I have one snare unit, I position it in the middle. If I have two snare units, like in this case, there has to be a gap of 6 cm between each snare unit and side panel. The easiest way to do this is to mark the position of the screws with small holes first and then to enlarge them using a larger nail. Before attaching the snare, I make sure that the strips are firmly in place. Now comes the moment that decides once and for all which ends of your cajon are going to be top and bottom. We'll begin with what is the bottom strip. That's the rectangular one. Here too, the strip has to be exactly flush with the front edge. If necessary, use the hammer for final minor adjustments. Now I'm going to turn the resonance box on its head and basically repeat the operation with the beveled strip. The strip has to be exactly flush with the front edge. First, I simply screw the snare unit onto the beveled wooden strip. It's important that the snare unit is positioned exactly in the middle of the strip. I take the screwdriver and the small screws and screw them into the holes I made earlier. Now I'm pretty close to having a finished cajon. Here, again, I apply the glue around the edges of the resonance box and I can put on the playing panel straight away. But first we have to remember to check that the logo is at the base of the cajon, so that the playing panel isn't mounted the wrong way around. Once again, the edges should be as flush with each other as possible. To ensure that the playing panel is pressed into place evenly, I equally distribute the pressure of the belts by taking the pressing board, laying it on the playing panel and then tightening the belts over it. Once again, allow the glue to harden a little. While it's drying, I can make use of the time to sand the edges of the sound hole in the rear panel using the sandpaper included in the kit. The easiest way to do this is to wrap the sandpaper around a sponge, for example, to make a sanding block. Be sure that you never sand against the grain. I glue the rear panel into place in exactly the same way as I did the playing panel. I apply the glue along the edges as before and then place the rear panel in position. Here, again, I have to check that it's flush. Now I take the pressing board again, lay it on the rear panel and pull the belts tight. Once again, we have to leave the glue to dry for 20 minutes. Now the edges have to be rounded off too. The easy option is to use a shaper or a pad sander, if you happen to have one lying around. But the edges can also be easily sanded by hand. It's particularly important here, of course, on the upper section of the playing surface. All I have to do now is attach the feet at all four corners of the base. And now the instrument is fully assembled. However, I advise anyone building their own cajon to wax the instrument or to oil it, for example with parquet oil, which is what I use, or to varnish it. This is important so that the wood is protected and you can enjoy your homemade cajon for a long time to come.